Hello, everybody. Hi. Welcome to live Q&A. This is the global community for adult survivors of childhood trauma who are currently living with CPTSD symptoms. Any type of childhood trauma, childhood abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, cult abuse, all types of childhood abuse and trauma. And now you're an adult and you are living with CPTSD symptoms, feelings of hopelessness and fear and worry and doubting yourself and wondering who you are, and you aren't really sure of your identity and you're really struggling. Emotional flashbacks, PTSD symptoms. You're in the right place. Ooh, excuse me. Oh my goodness. I've been sneezing for the last couple hours, and I don't know if it's because I'm allergic to something or what, so I apologize that I just sneezed in your ears. Earphone warning, earbud warning. Tonight's topic is anger and rage, and we are going to talk about how to navigate the waters of those feelings that we're having while we are in recovery for CPTSD, and how those things show up, how quickly we move from being triggered into a feeling of rage, uncontrollable rage or anger. And that's the topic for tonight. If you are here for the live discussion, thanks for giving this video a thumbs up and thanks for reading the video description. If you're here on a replay, thank you so much for being here. We love that you're here. This is a live discussion, and over here on Monday, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, there's a chat box where you can enter your questions, or you can use Twitter and type a question and use the hashtag #NoMoreShame. And then I do my best to answer the question. So right here on YouTube, there is a chat box if you're here live on Monday, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, or you can use Twitter as well. But whether you're watching a replay or if you're here live, I want to welcome you and very sincerely thank you for choosing to be here and choosing to be a part of this community. It is because of people like you that this community is so transforming and powerfully healing. This is a safe place. We allow zero cyber bullies and cyber trolls, and if anyone in the community that shows up for support chooses to be unkind and unwelcoming and rude and hurtful and judgmental of anyone else in the community in the comment section or in the chat box over here during live discussion, then they are blocked and removed, and they're not welcome back to join us ever, ever, ever. For the most part, for the last 4 years, we've been building this community, and the people that are here want to be here and they want to receive support and give support, and they want to be kind to others, and they understand that this is a place of kindness and safety, and that being unkind and disrespectful and rude and hurtful to others is just not okay. So we are cultivating that environment. I've been coming here for almost 4 years now. I've been involved in online group support for over 4 years now, and video-wise, almost 4 years now. And I'm just so proud of every single one of you guys. You guys are the reason this is a thing. You guys are the reason this is amazing. So just as a heads up and a warning, YouTube is never a place for crisis support. So I'm not a doctor, and while I am trauma informed, I am not a psychologist or a psychiatrist. So these videos are simply all from a lived experience perspective. They are from a trauma-informed coaching perspective, a place for support and to get your questions answered and guidance and sort of some high fives and some virtual hugs, and a safe place for you to figure out your journey, but definitely never a place for you to receive medical care, professional health care. So please do seek always professional health care and medical care on your own, away from these videos. You deserve a team. The most transformational recovery, trauma recovery, happens when you have a team, and that's a therapist, a counselor, a primary care physician, a coach, group support. And when you combine all of those factors, you heal at an exponential rate. And I am just a small pebble of what it is that's available to you out there. I'm simply here to share with you all the different resources that you can possibly find so you can heal from childhood trauma, exploitation, trafficking, abuse, traumas of all kinds. So that's who I am. That's what this is. This is where you are. And if all of that sounds great, you're in the right place. We're going to talk about the topic of anger tonight and rage. What the differences are, how they show up, how to navigate those feelings. We're going to talk about triggers. We're going to talk about emotional regulation. We're going to talk about distress tolerance. We're going to talk about self-soothing. We're going to talk about what it looks like when rage comes up and why it takes a lot of patience to heal from trauma. So thank you for being here. And I will go ahead and dive right in and just welcome all of you guys that are here. Gosh, there's over 40 of you here already, and I already have people sending in some questions. So that's wonderful. Thanks for sending in your questions. Without you guys sending in questions, we wouldn't have live Q&A every single week. So it's because of you that we all even have a place to come, right? Because if you don't send in your questions, then I have nothing to really talk about but just stuff, and I would rather answer your questions or do my best to answer your questions. So I want to say thank you, first of all, to Dawn and Matt, who are moderating tonight, and we're just so grateful for both of you. Thank you to Lisa, who is vetting everyone for safe groups. If you are not in a group, a safe group of supportive other supportive people who have been through trauma, and you would like to be in a group, and it's free, it's virtual, so you can access it from anywhere, from your smartphone or from your computer or your tablet, then please email Lisa at cptsdfoundation.org, and I will have her start a conversation with you and welcome you into the groups that you wish to be a part of. We have several groups available for you. So I just am so excited that you all are as passionate about healing as I am. It really is just such an encouragement. I'm just in awe of all of you. And thanks to Kalisha for running our Instagram survivor community, and to Jody B, who tweets out crisis information, suicide prevention information, hotline information, encouraging quotes every single day, all day. Thanks to all of you that retweet all of those. And just for all the research that you guys send me. I receive so many links to so many videos and resources and blog posts. And Heather Tuba runs a group for the spouses of trauma survivors. So we're not the only ones. We, the survivors, are not the only ones that are on a journey. Our spouses and our partners, our loved ones, they're on a journey as well. And what they're going through as a result of helping us heal is also a lot to handle. So we're just a big group of people that are just trying to help each other heal. So thank you to Heather for that. Thank you to Holistic Recovery and Deborah Herendine for sending in your questions already. If you have questions on the topic of anger or rage and how it shows up in your CPTSD recovery and how to navigate that, please go ahead and put that over here in the chat box if you're here live, or down below if you're watching a replay, and I'll do the very best I can to answer everyone's questions. Just get a drink of water really quick. And gosh, there's more of you already arriving. Welcome to everybody. So if you guys were here last week, you know that I had a sewage flood in my apartment on the day that we had a ballistic missile supposedly heading for Hawaii, where I live. And it was kind of one of those really big days. And every single day last week, I had someone in my apartment, which causes when your safe space is invaded, whether it's by a potential ballistic missile, a sewage flood, or people coming in that smell of all kinds of different smells that remind you of childhood abuse, your life is interrupted. And it caused me to feel fear and unsafety. Last week's topic was how to navigate through feelings of fear and unsafety. And I've received so many emails from a lot of you guys talking about just how fear and unsafety show up in your life and how that was really helpful for you. Oh, really quickly, I want to also say thank you to Heroes Don't Wear Capes. Thank you to Sabra, Molly Black and Blue, and Malta McMurchie. Maybe it's McMurphy? I think it's McMurchie. Malta McMurchie. So thank you to all you guys who are sending in questions. I'm so excited. So I'm just going to really quickly go through a screen share. What I was just going to wrap up about feelings of fear and unsafety is it's interesting how sometimes feelings of fear and unsafety can morph into other feelings that show up in our CPTSD recovery that we might not even be prepared for, such as feelings of anger or feelings of depression or hopelessness, feelings of overwhelmedness, and feelings also of confusion, or also feelings of shame. Those are some things that I just sort of clocked, and tracked. I was sort of looking at the times and looking at the dates and looking at the ways they showed up in my life this week, just as a result of just one incident. So it really is a helpful thing for us, the survivors, to do, take an introspective look, pause, and be patient with ourselves and look at all of the things we are feeling. Listen to our body, find out where we're feeling things. What area of our body are we feeling the things in, the different feelings? Is it a raging headache that feels like pressure behind our eyes? Is it something that's showing up in our throat, in our glands, in our ears? Are we tense? Do we feel like we slept wrong and maybe our shoulders we've just been like our shoulders are tense for like weeks? Or do we have a stomach ache? Are we nauseous? Do we feel like we got punched in the solar plexus? Are we having feelings in other areas of our body? It's really, really helpful and important to check in with our body and find out where things are showing up and documenting that, tracking that. Matt from survivingmypast.net has some tracker sheets that he has available on his website. I've referred dozens of people to those tracker sheets, and they really are helpful. I referred some clients to those tracker sheets. If you're just interested to see how things show up in your body and at what times, and to track the flow of how it is that you're feeling and how things are showing up, it really does help you with your recovery journey, so that you know, okay, well, this is what happened, and this is how I'm navigating the waters of this. And when I handle it this way, and when I take care of myself in the following ways, then I feel better for longer periods of time. Because the goal of this channel and the goal of just helping people with their recovery is that we would feel better for longer, that we would find ourselves waking up on a certain day and feeling better than we did the day before, and for that feeling of feeling better to last longer than it did before, and to that it would be a momentum, like a forward pace, a forward momentum in our healing journey, so that we don't and some days we're going to feel like we're sliding back down a slimy pit or a hill, or down a spiral into shame or depression. But the goal is always for us to find a little bit of traction and to move just a little bit forward. And the only way that we really know if that's happening is if we track what it is that's going on with us. That's why we talk about journaling so often on this channel. Journaling really has been the key to some professionals that I work with closely, that are colleagues of mine. They 100% across the board give journaling homework to 100% of their patients, 100% of their clients. I have doctors that I have a client of mine that's a doctor of psychiatry, and a doctor of psychology, and a board certified psychologist, the American Psychiatric Association board certified psychologist. And they actually, the homework every single week that they give their patients is journaling homework. And even if it's just one word, it's got to be at least one word a day. Got to look at that every single day, and so that we have something to go off of. And then we can look at, well, what happened that day, and why were we feeling that way? What were your highs? What were your lows? How is it that you're feeling in your body? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just share with you a couple of things, screen share wise, so that we can keep this discussion going here. So here we go. This is just a brief outline of what we're doing this week. There we go. Brief outline of what we're doing. So we're just talking about, this is week 2 of navigating our feelings during CPTSD recovery. And this is the website you can go to if you have questions about healing from CPTSD. And this week we are talking about anger and rage. So what typically will happen, and this follows the same pattern as last week, is anger and rage don't just show up in a vacuum out of nowhere. When we begin to feel feelings of anger or rage, typically we're triggered by something. So then we ask ourselves, what is this trigger? What was the trigger? And let me see here. I have some other screen shares that I want to make sure that here we go. So it's the ones that I showed you last week when we're triggered. Okay. And we talked about we talked about fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. We talked about distress tolerance and coping strategies. I remember last week I was sharing with you how my feelings were showing up as I was obsessively and compulsively organizing. That was how I was soothing myself. That was what I was doing to self-soothe. And then I wanted to make sure that I followed that up with some really good self-care. And then I was taking my time and making sure that I was paying attention to my body and being really patient with myself. So let's just talk about some potential things that could happen that could trigger anger or rage. I'm only going to talk about myself because this channel is from a lived experience perspective. So really quickly, I'm going to follow the same pattern as I did last week. The pattern I followed last week is I talk about what the trigger was. I was flown into a flashback. What was the flashback? And what was I in? Was I in a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn? And then I sit with that without judgment. And then I practice distress tolerance. I'm going to make my way through this. I really am going to be okay. I observe my behaviors. Oh, this is last week's. Last week's was obsessive and compulsive organizing. So I'll share with you what my behaviors were around the topic of anger and rage. And then I move to self-soothing so that I don't spiral out of control into a shame spiral. And then I follow that up with self-care, and then I'm patient with myself. So let's just really quickly, we'll go boom, 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 boom. Okay? So put my phone down and talk with my hands. All right, so I've shared this on this channel previously. It's one of my very most common triggers that triggers me from like a 0 to 1,000 bitch mode, as I call it. I know that gets some chuckles, but like I am not an angry type of person anymore. I was when I was much younger, before I sought out psychotherapy, traditional psychotherapy, different modalities of psychotherapy to help me with the anger management that I was struggling with, and with the rage that I was being flung into unknowingly, and where that was coming from. So my biggest and most often occurring trigger is in my relationship with my husband. And why would that be? Why would that be that I'm triggered most often with my husband? Well, he is the closest person to me. Previously, before I got together with my husband, my biggest trigger was with my son, because he was the closest one to me. We were together every day for 17 years. Like, rarely were we ever apart. So when you're together sort of every single day for 17 years with someone, it's not all roses. You're going to have things that trigger memories and feelings, especially if you're going through trauma recovery and you really want to work on yourself and you want to be introspective, you want to be doing your deep work so that you can live a happy, healthy, and whole life and have whole and healthy relationships, right? So I'm going to talk about present day now with my husband. What throws me into an emotional flashback and into a rage and anger that is truly all-encompassing and almost uncontrollable is when my husband asks me a question and I take the time to explain and answer the question exactly, and I do my best to try to do everything right. Right? You see what I'm doing the air quotes here. Hopefully, if y'all are listening and not viewing this, I'm emphasizing things with air quotes, because when someone asks us a question and then it's our job to answer them. If we come from an environment of overachievement or perfectionism, or we were raised in an environment where us being good listeners and being almost psychic to the adults around us, our life depended on that, then it truly is a life or death situation for us in that moment. So here I am, an adult. I'm fully functioning adult Athena. I'm like, hey, here I am. I'm running a business. I'm running a foundation. I'm volunteering. I'm doing all this work here in my community, in the global community. I'm doing all this stuff. I'm fine, right? I look like I'm adulting pretty well. And then my husband will ask me a question, and then I will do my very best to answer the question as precisely and perfectly as possible, giving all of the details that he could possibly need to answer his question. And then if he doesn't listen to me, or he ignores me, or I perceive that he is ignoring me, and he asks me the same question again within a couple of moments, even though I just spent all this time answering it and giving him all of the details and all of the facts, and I looked on this website and I did this and I researched this and I did that and I've compared and contrasted and I've come to this conclusion that this is the best possible way to do this. Thank you for asking. I have done so well. Give me my effing gold star. Right? Or if I'm a child, I get to live today. I get to maybe get some food, or I get to maybe not get abused. I get to, not get treated poorly. Like, it's a true emotional flashback from severe trauma if I'm ignored, or if my answer isn't quote unquote good enough. And so if he'll just innocently ask me, hey, what was such and such? I will, from the moment he says, hey, what was, fill in the blank, whatever, I will say, do you mean to tell me that I spent the last however long explaining all of that to you? I gave you every detail. I researched everything. I told you everything I could possibly tell you. I took the time to speak precisely and clearly in a way that I thought you could receive it. And you're asking me the same question again, or you're ignoring me because I'm not important enough for you to listen to. Do you see what I did there? I took decades of trauma and his innocent question, because he might have been, I don't know, human. In a moment, he could have been human. I mean, we're all human. He could have forgot what I said. He could have maybe not heard me. You know how sometimes if you're chewing, you can't hear someone very well over the sound of what you're chewing, like if it's salad, like romaine lettuce, like it's really loud. So he could be like, what'd you say? I didn't hear you. And like something as simple as that could fling me into a full-blown emotional flashback that results in uncontrollable rage and like anger, and then I'm exhausted afterwards. Because the way it was explained to me back in 2007 by my second therapist and first EMDR practitioner, Athena, what you survived as a child and things that were done to you were outrageous. Therefore, it is natural for you in your body and everything in you to rage out. So something is triggering that in you, and we need to figure out what it is. And so for me, in raising my son and in being in a relationship with my husband, when I am blatantly ignored or not listened to, or my answer that I worked so hard to give perfectly isn't good enough, I seriously might as well just be like stabbed with a knife or something. Like thrown across the room, like physical punishment would be less painful than that. Because for me, growing up, if I was put in charge of some sort of piece of information, I paid attention to that. I was conscientious. I mean, I could repeat things verbatim. I was talking with a client about this week. I have near total recall when it comes to certain conversations. And then at the same time, interestingly, I will forget like entire periods of my life. And it's just so interesting how it can shift like that, how it's just different like that. So that's how the emotional flashback and the trigger happens for me. It happens when I am ignored or my answer isn't good enough, even though it's the very best answer I have. I get flung into an emotional flashback and I'm raging out at my poor husband who's just being human. So that's my trigger. And then, so what I'm going to do now is briefly just do this screen share for you. And then I'm going to answer you guys' questions. So here we go. One more time. We're talking about anger and rage. Okay. I'm triggered by being ignored. I'm thrown into a flashback that causes me to believe that my life depends on speaking properly. In that moment, I freeze first and then I come out fighting. Okay. That's how I respond to that. And so my distress tolerance, first of all, we're going to talk about what distress tolerance is, and then how that shows up and how I can depend upon that. And then my behaviors that we're going to observe are the ones I just shared with you, which are the way that I pause, begin freaking out and talking with my hands and repeating myself over and over and over and asking why I was ignored and why I wasn't important enough to listen to. And then I have to move into a self-soothing situation because it's not my husband's job to put me back together when I'm falling apart because he didn't do anything wrong. He was just being human. It's up to me. It's up to me to soothe myself in that moment because I'm the one that's in trauma recovery. Okay. And then I make sure that I follow that up with self-care. And then I have to be extra patient with myself because I am worth it. We are worth it. Okay, so first we're going to go ahead and we're going to look at, we're going to go boom, boom, boom and look through these, okay? Okay, first we're gonna talk about the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So, oh nope, that was patience. Whoops. Whoops. Wrong screen shares, you guys. Why don't I just talk here with you guys since my screen shares are acting crazy? I'm not clicking on the right ones here. That's okay. So we'll just go back to this. We talked about the trigger. I'm flown into a flashback of not being important enough to listen to. I freeze and can't believe that he hasn't heard me. And I feel absolutely, utterly hopeless in that moment that this is just unfixable and it's horrible. And then I come out fighting. Earlier I said flighting, but I meant fighting. I come out fighting. And then so I wanted to talk about distress tolerance, if I could find the proper screen share for distress tolerance, because I want to remind us what it is. Here we go. Is that the right one? Yes. Maybe it was the right one earlier. Maybe I was on the correct one. So distress tolerance is an emerging construct in psychology that has been conceptualized in several different ways. Broadly, however, it refers to an individual's perceived capacity to withstand negative emotional and or other aversive states, and the behavioral act of withstanding distressing internal states elicited by some type of stressor. Some definitions of distress tolerance have also specified that the endurance of these negative events occur in contexts in which methods to escape the distressor exist. So basically, in that moment, the way that I'm handling the stress, I'm in distress, and the way I'm tolerating what I'm in is I'm choosing in that moment, after I've completely gone like, what are you talking about? I can't believe you didn't listen to me. Why am I not important enough for you to listen to? Why would you ignore me like that? Oh my goodness, blah, 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 right? Then, because I've already frozen and then I came out fighting. So now I need to sit with this. And what I've done, I just did it this week. Okay, I just did it this week with my husband. I said, I want to pause for a second and I need to say something. I am absolutely at my breaking point right now. I have so many peripheral things going on in my life with people being in our home every single day. My safe place, my refuge has been invaded by workers who smell like different things that are very triggering for me. And my private space is being invaded and I don't have any safety. And so my distress tolerance skills are being affected, and I have not been able to navigate the waters of anything stressful that comes at me effectively. And you don't deserve to be treated this way. You don't deserve for me to flip out on you and give you a lecture because you didn't hear something I said, because you said what, or could you repeat that? So I'm so sorry. I apologize, and I hope you'll accept my apology. If you don't accept my apology, I understand. I just wanted you to know that this is where I'm at and this is where I'm coming from. And so, we worked through that, etc. And then I followed that up with self-soothing. So how am I self-soothing? So what I did is I took a walk outside. I went for a walk. We have this complex that we live in, and there's like a pool down the way. And I just went for a walk, like nature trail type walk with trees and grass, and like just past some of there's a golf course nearby. And, I was just watching people. People watching is very soothing for me. And so that was kind of the way that I was practicing self-soothing. I was doing some people watching. I was going for a walk. I was getting my heart rate up a little bit. I'm breathing, getting some extra oxygen flowing in my blood into my brain. And then I chose to come back and take care of myself by taking a nap. And, I revisited the topic with my husband and just said, again, I know that you said that you accept my apology, but I really am sorry that I overreacted and I treated you that way. You don't deserve to be treated that way, and you don't treat me that way. So I just want you to know that I'm working on some things. And, his response, of course, is so sweet. He's like, I know you're working on some things. You're working so hard, and you're working so hard in therapy. And you're working so hard in EMDR, and, you're going through a lot, and we have a lot going on, and, we might be moving pretty soon. And, we're just, there's a lot of life transition stuff that's happening right now. And life transition stuff can really affect our distress tolerance, and it can really cause us to be triggered more often and feel unsafe more often and need to take a nap more often or need to sleep longer, need to hydrate more water, more green vegetables. Let me take a drink of water on that note, you guys. 1 second. So that's me doing some extra self-care. And, it really is important for us to celebrate our little wins. We have little wins and we have big wins. And, it's important to celebrate the big wins, of course, but it really is just as important to celebrate the little wins. And patience is key, like I was mentioning last week. If we are not patient with ourselves and with others during our trauma recovery, healing from CPTSD and anything that's CPTSD related, then we're going to find this cycle that I just shared with you repeated more often. I want to repeat that one more time because this is super, super, super key, and I don't want anybody to miss it. The more we hold a space for ourselves, like a safe space for ourselves, and the more that we're patient with ourselves in our trauma recovery, the less often we're going to see that cycle repeated. So we do have that Moberg Parish trauma response model that someone shared about in the comments last week. It talks about revisiting the anchor trauma and moving through the model of, chaos and recovery all the way to advocacy. But the more patient we are with ourselves, the more we hold a safe space for ourselves, and we set ourselves up with success by being surrounded by other community members and helping professionals and just safe people in general. The healthier boundaries we have and the more patient we are with ourselves, the less often that cycle that I shared with you gets repeated. The less often I fling out in rage and I feel angry. The less often my anger is off the charts, or I'm just flying off the hook and saying things that I normally wouldn't say. The more I'm patient with myself, the more I hold a safe space for myself and I don't judge where I'm at, then the less often that cycle of me flinging out of control and then handling my distress and then making sure that I'm self-soothing and then making sure that I'm following that up with self-care and then I need to be really extra patient with myself, the less often all of that revolution happens. It happens fewer times the more patient I am with myself, the more I hold that safe space for myself. Notice I didn't say the more often I rely on somebody else to fix me. I think for most of my trauma recovery, this is not something I'm proud of, but it's honest. For most of my trauma recovery, I think a lot of the time I was relying on someone else to fix me. I was looking for someone else to rescue me. I think a lot of us that are in CPTSD recovery are searching for someone to rescue us, someone to make it better, because we really don't believe that we can do it on our own, because we were told from a very young age that we would never be able to do it on our own, or we had things said to us like you're never going to make it when you're older. I hope you have 5 kids just like yourself and you'll see how horrible you are, things like that. Like, who says that kind of stuff to people? Like, that's just horrible. So again, for the majority of my trauma recovery, I think I was relying on someone else to rescue me. And it wasn't until I admitted to myself, no one's coming. No one's coming to rescue me. I need to rescue me. I'm the one that needs to hold a safe space for myself. I'm the one who needs to make the healthy choices. I'm the one who needs to establish and maintain the healthy boundaries. I'm the one that needs to try. Even if I just hold my ground on some days, and then other days I make one step forward, and then some days it's 2 steps back, and some days it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And you know what? Some days, again, just holding your ground is actually progress. But it wasn't until I figured out that no one was coming. No one's going to rescue me. I need to rescue me. I need to take care of all of the younger versions of myself that went through the trauma. I need to take care of me, the adult me. I need to be the one that shows up for me. Me. I do. It's my responsibility. No one's going to rescue me. It wasn't until I did that I stopped getting angry all the time. I stopped raging and getting angry all the time once I didn't realize it, but I held an expectation, a silent expectation that someone was coming. And when they didn't show up, it fucking pissed me off. Like, it pissed me off. I was angry. It was irritating. Like, what's wrong with these people? Like, where is my knight in shining armor? Or where is my rescuer? I've been doing this all alone for 40 years. No one's helped me. I was told I was the designated adult from like age 5. Like, I'm tired. When is someone going to come along and rescue me? I had this silent, like, air of entitlement. And I really felt that way. So it wasn't until I just was like, you know what? No one's coming. I need to be my person. And that was an overwhelming thought. I'm not going to lie. It was scary and it was sad. But the more I showed up for myself, you guys, don't miss this. Please don't miss this. The more I showed up for myself, the more I cultivated an environment where other people just wanted to show up and be around me. And I had more support than I even knew what to deal with as soon as I showed up for me. Like, I feel like that, Michael Jackson song, like, I'm starting with the man in the mirror, like, I started with me. I had to start with me. Once I showed up for me, I looked around and there were all these amazing people that were supportive type of people. But when I sat back and I was just waiting to be rescued, there was no one in sight. So I'm not promising you that you start showing up for yourself and there's going to magically be people around you. I'm only sharing it from my lived experience perspective because that's all I can give you is my perspective. So I'm going to spend the rest of our time together answering all of your questions. And I hope that that was helpful for you. Thank you so much for sending in all of the questions. Thank you so much, Ashton. And thank you, Katie and Billy and Willow. I'm going to go back up to the top and I'm going to start at the top, okay? Okay, so Holistic Recovery says, how can we stop repressing our anger? Ooh, this is a good question. So the quickest way that my clients have shared with me that they can stop repressing their anger is by it's very simple to just write out like once a day how it is that you're feeling, or when you begin to feel angry, rather than judging it, saying I really shouldn't be angry right now, anger is unacceptable, to writing down like I feel angry about, and just writing it out. There's something about writing it out. Harriet, if you could pop up the link to the journaling video, the field trip that we all took together. I know that we talk a lot about journaling, and it's kind of like people are like rolling their eyes like, oh, Athena's talking about journaling again. But it really is the one of the fastest ways to stop repressing our anger is to give ourselves permission. We don't realize that we need permission. So I'm giving you permission. If no one's ever given you permission to feel angry, I'm giving you permission to feel angry. And just so you guys know, a lot of people whose abuse began in their teen years and older, their early childhood, we're not dealing with attachment trauma from like birth to like 8, and then like even early adolescence. Let's say that part of your life was super solid and your sexual abuse began when you're in your early teens. They don't have any trouble accessing their anger at all. Their anger just flies and comes. They don't repress it. Like there's no repressing that goes on. They don't have trouble accessing their anger. The clients of mine that have trouble accessing their anger are the ones that their abuse began really, really young, like birth to infancy. There was neglect, there's severe attachment trauma, and their sense of self was never formed, and they just lived in constant fear. And they were anger was never an acceptable emotion. It was suppressed from a very young age when they, nothing helped. And so writing about it, even if it's just a couple of words, and giving yourself permission to feel those feelings and just writing them out, taking the initiative to write out, I feel angry because, and just even if you just list one thing, like what you feel angry about, because that jerk cut me off in traffic, because 3 people cut in line in front of me at Starbucks, and that's wrong, and I would never cut in front of people, and who do they think they are? And just writing it out is very powerful. Deborah says, why is it that sometimes people perceive me to be angry when I don't feel angry, especially triggered? Oh, and thank you to John Harvey. I just saw that John Harvey sent in a question as well. Deborah says, why is it sometimes people perceive me to be angry when I don't feel angry, especially triggered? I'm wondering if Deborah, I don't understand the second part of the question, so I'm just going to try. So I'm not sure why people would perceive you to be angry when you don't feel angry. I'm really not sure. I remember people saying to me when I was really, really, really young that I was angry, but I realize now, Deborah, looking back, that the people that were saying those things to me and that were perceiving me to be angry were they were manipulative. Like they were actually trying to find a reason to blame me for something. So I really don't have enough context to answer this particular question, and I'm so sorry. And I don't know about the triggered part. If you could clarify, maybe give us a little context, and maybe I'll be able to send you an email. So email me info@CPTSD Foundation, and I'll answer your question this week as soon as I possibly can. John Harvey says, how to handle your anger in a safe way. So there are a lot of ways that I've learned to handle my anger. I've learned to channel it into, whether it's housework or going for a walk, going for a run. I remember I did this whole like kickboxing class that I went to, and I felt less angry. But those are just very vanilla ways that people tell you that you can deal with your anger. But John Harvey, honestly, one of the safest and healthiest ways is to channel that into something that you're proud of. Like in our community, you're really good about this, John Harvey. Post in the group, trigger warning for anger, and then post a rant about what it is that you're angry about, and you're not sure why you're feeling angry, or you are sure. And then simply just share in a safe space why you're angry and what you're angry about. And then maybe ask, has anybody else ever dealt with this? Or am I all alone here? Is this something only I deal with? Or open it up for advice if you want advice. And I know that you'll get some answers. That's one of the healthiest ways. Holistic Recovery says, does our anger let us know that our boundaries have been crossed or abuse is taking place? Absolutely. If we're flown into something as an adult now and we're feeling angry, it is a very good indication that someone has crossed a boundary. 100%. In fact, I should have said that earlier on in the broadcast, but that's a perfectly worded question, and it is absolutely true. When we're triggered into anger or rage, which rage is never safe. I'm not advocating rage at all and saying that it's okay, because it's very unhealthy. It can make us very sick. It can cause, horrible physical illnesses in us if we stuff rage and we don't let that out. And raging out on other people is very dangerous, and it harms other people as well and damages relationships. So I'm not advocating for rage, but holding it in is very, very, very unhealthy. But when we feel that anger come up, it is an excellent indication that someone's crossed a boundary. And it could be either a communicated boundary or a non-communicated boundary. I have boundaries that I didn't even know I had because I've never verbalized them. I've never communicated them. Like a boundary for me, touching on earlier in this video, a boundary for me is if you don't care enough to listen when you ask me a question and I take time to answer your question and do the very best I can, and you just say something like, huh? What? And like, because you're ignoring me, like that's not okay for me. And just really quick, also touching back to the beginning of the video where the earlier on in the video when I was saying that when my husband ignores me, that it's triggering for me. I honestly have figured out in therapy after like 10, 15, what am I? I'm going on 18 years now of healing therapy. I've learned that my voice was never heard when I was a child. I was never worth listening to as a child, even though I was communicating and telling people, these are the horrible things that are happening to me. This is the environment I'm living in. These are the circumstances I'm being put in as a child. And of course I wasn't using this type of vernacular, but I would speak up about my abuse when I was a child and nothing was ever done about it. And when I called my dad out on it and said, these are the things that happened to me when I was younger, his response was, oh, I wish you would have said something. I would have done something about it. And I have never in my life been so filled with rage as I was in that moment, because I pulled over the car and I said, I can't believe you just said that to me. How dare you? I told you every week how bad it was. I did speak up and you ignored it. You were too weak of a person to do what was right for your daughter. So don't you dare say you wished I would have said something or you would have done something about it. Because you're too weak. And that's not my fault. That's your character flaw. So that was a hard conversation to have with my father, not one that I'm proud of, but it needed to happen, and it's the truth. So yes, anger definitely is a good indicator that our boundaries have been crossed. Heroes Don't Wear Capes says, If I'm around abusive behavior, I'm only happy and positive, or I freeze. But I can access the full range of emotions for others, even anger and blind rage, like a mama bear protective. Yeah. Um, this comes from a place of self-worth. Heroes don't wear capes. Um, I definitely identify with that, and that was me for probably like the first almost like 15 years of my recovery. Um, People would be abusive and neglectful toward me or inappropriate towards me, and I was just totally fine. I allowed it. I played it off like everything was okay, and I didn't show up for me. I was waiting for someone else to rescue me from that situation, and they never came. But then if someone were to do something to say something or do something to someone I cared about, oh, hell hath no fury. I would go off. It was almost comical how angry and rageful I would get and how I would stand up for other people, but not for myself, because I didn't see myself as worthy of standing up for or saving or rescuing. So I definitely identify with that. Heroes don't wear capes. Sabra says, how does one begin to feel safe with their own anger? Anger can be scary, especially for younger parts of us. Yes, Sabra, I agree. And it took me, again, people that where their abuse began in their tweens or teens, they have no problem accessing their anger whatsoever. And I also found that a lot of people who were never sexually abused, if they grew up in alcoholic homes, or if they were verbally abused, or emotionally abused, or even physically abused, they have no problem accessing their rage and their anger. It's those who were sexually abused and those whose abuse happened earlier on. What I can tell you, Sabra, is that one of the first ways that I found to feel safe with my own anger is by advocating for others. 4 years ago, more than 4 years ago, I showed up online in a Twitter chat, and I was able to feel very, very, very angry for other people. And then when I realized that they had been through some of the same things that I had been through, I was able to slowly apply some of that anger to some of my situations. But it was only through the outlets. It was only through me showing up for myself and telling myself that I'm worth it through words, actions, and thoughts, like making sure that I showed up at my therapy appointments, making sure that I took medication if I needed medication, making sure that if I was in pain, I took some Advil, or if I needed to go to the doctor, I went to the doctor, showing up for myself in practical ways, feeding myself healthy foods, resting, hydrating. It wasn't until I was properly, this is for Sabra, it wasn't until I was properly parenting myself and adulting as often as possible that I could access that anger and feel entitled to it, because it was like I was feeling like more of a whole person or something, and then it just came naturally, and I felt like, yes, I can feel angry about this. I'm doing this, and this, and doing all these things right, and and I'm worth being upset about that. Like, it's wrong that I was treated that way. It's just unacceptable. But it wasn't until I started taking care of myself and showing up for myself and not expecting someone else to come rescue me, it wasn't until then that I was able to actually access that anger on my own behalf. So I hope that's helpful. Molly Black and Blue says, is it worth the energy to express anger to someone whom you know will not understand or care? If not, what do we do with that unexpressed anger? Ooh, this is such a good question. Someone tag Molly and thank her and tell her I'm answering her question, because she sent this in like 35, 40 minutes ago, and I don't want her to think that I forgot about her. First of all, excellently worded question, wondering if it's even worth it to express anger to someone who will not understand or care. And the answer is no, it's not worth it. And then I want to tell you why. If someone is emotionally unavailable and lacking in empathy and compassion, you will literally waste what little energy you have, and it will be like talking to a brick wall. And it is so, 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 so painful and very invalidating. And you follow it up with, if not, what do we do with that unexpressed anger? I highly recommend finding a safe group of individuals, whether it's in-person safe group or even a virtual safe group, which we have plenty. We have many of them if you're interested. That's the healthiest way, and you will get validated by 5, 10, 15, 20 people, like boom, 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 right away. And all of a sudden you're like, I knew I wasn't crazy. I have 5 people who have gone through the same thing, or 10 people or 20 people or 30 people or 80 people. Like I've woken up one morning and seen someone comment, post something in one of our groups, and there's like 80 comments, all while I was sleeping. So it's the best way to just write about it, post about it. This is how I'm feeling, and this is why. Has anybody else ever experienced this? Really get validated for what it is that you've been through. It's so therapeutic. If you're interested in doing that, or if anyone watching live or on a replay is interested in being validated in a safe community that truly is safe and there's no abuse or minimization that's allowed whatsoever, otherwise you're deleted forever, you can email Lisa at cptsdfoundation.org, and she will help you get plugged into one of our groups. And we have one for women, one for men and women, one for people who are healing from narcissistic abuse. We have one for LGBTQ community who is healing from sexual abuse. We have, and I have other groups that are starting up, and I even have a collaboration that I'm doing starting up in March, where it's going to be daily groups, and that one's going to be paid. All the rest that I just mentioned are free. So hopefully that's helpful for you, Molly. Malta says, how can we move on when friends keep showing us concern about what we've forgiven? How can we move on when friends keep showing us concern about what we've forgiven? Ooh, I'm not sure. Let me see if I can just, I'm not psychic, and you've communicated very clearly. Maybe I'm just missing it. It's my fault. You haven't done anything wrong, Malta. How can we move on when friends keep showing concern about what we've forgiven? I think if you feel like moving on and you've already forgiven someone, then you don't need to listen to your friends. You need to definitely do what's best for you and not worry about what anybody else says. I hope that answers your question. And if not, email me, info@cptsdfoundation.org, and I will answer your question to the best of my ability this week, hopefully. I hope. Molly says, how do you deal with the shame and guilt of not feeling anger toward your abusers when you still feel loyal to them to degrees? Ooh, Molly, this is such a good question. I dealt with this for so long. And I had a lot of shame and guilt for not feeling angry, and probably up until about 3 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. The only way that I was able to deal with that is to show up for myself and to be committed to talking about the nuances of what it was that I went through, and just if it were someone else, would that be right or wrong? I actually had to have like a therapist point it out to me. So if someone did this to your own child, or someone did this to your dog, someone did this to your cat, someone did this to your pet, someone did this to your best friend, someone did this to your child, would that be okay? And I was like, no, it would not be okay. And so just dealing with the aftermath of those feelings, how I didn't show up for myself, I had to be really committed and actually have someone sort of hold a safe space for me, because I really did do what I needed to do to survive. And the only way to stop that shame spiral and feeling guilty all the time is the first step, Molly, is to establish and maintain a healthy boundary with the people that were abusive towards us. If we're still in contact with the people who are abusive towards us, we are always going to feel shame and guilt. We need to separate ourselves and at least go low contact. I'm not saying you have to go no contact. No contact would help you heal, and it would stop the shame spiral and it would stop the guilt. But your shame and guilt will not go away if you're still in contact with those abusers that you feel loyal to. Willow says, I go from 0 to 100 with no in between. I need a middle ground. Even tiny issues, I try to be assertive and self-advocate. Instead, I end up being so anxious, I become an asshole. Yes, Willow, I did that too. I overcorrected. I abandoned myself my whole life. And then all of a sudden, I'm trying to show up for myself. And and I end up raging out and becoming an asshole, like you said. And then I realized, for me, all I can say is I hear you. That was totally me. You've described me. When this stopped for me, Willow, is when I actually started showing up for myself, and I stopped subconsciously, unconsciously, silently expecting someone else to come to my rescue. So I'm not saying you, Willow, are subconsciously, unconsciously, and silently expecting someone else to rescue you. But for me, that was when my 0 to 100 bitch mode, my 0 to 100 asshole, that was when that version of me stopped showing up so often. Like, the fact that it showed up this week is huge for me, because and I think it just has to do with the sewage flood and the ballistic missile scare and having my space invaded and wondering if we're going to be moving in a couple months. And it's just so much going on. And then I just found out, I got a phone call yesterday that my Nana passed away, and she was one of the sweetest, most wonderful people. She was my adopted mom or adopted grandma, and she passed away yesterday morning. So dealing with grief, dealing with my privacy being invaded, dealing with extenuating circumstances. I want to give myself a little bit of grace there, but it didn't stop for me, Willow, until I started showing up for myself and I stopped expecting other people to rescue me. So Dawn says, my very first therapist gave me tools. She gave me safe ways to explode my anger. I can't use sharp objects or firearms, but my favorite way is to freeze water into huge chunks and then smash them to the ground. I love that. That's amazing. I did something similar with one of my therapists, where I got the biggest boulder I could possibly lift and I threw it off of a cliff. I drove to this area of the island that I absolutely love. It's probably 15 miles that way, which is my favorite way to go because I never see anybody I know. But I picked up boulders and I threw them off this cliff. I made sure there was nobody down there, of course, but it was similar to what Dawn is talking about. And it was very helpful for me, very therapeutic. Billy Hawkins says, Athena, thanks so much for your wisdom. I find that I struggle with anger towards, you're welcome, by the way. Thank you for even being here, Billy Hawkins. He says, oops, go back. He says, I find that I struggle with anger towards self more than anger towards anyone else because I allowed so much, etc. What helps with that? Oh, this is so good. So I was even telling a colleague this morning that I have these parts of myself, from ages 14 to 24. I'm working in EMDR right now with those parts. And I have so much shame and so much guilt about what I allowed to happen, in air quotes, like you put here, allowed. And me even using the word allowed for a 14-year-old. And then all the way even to age 24, I was, arrested development. I didn't have a proper upbringing. I wasn't taught healthy patterns, etc. I don't know all of your details, Billy, but I'm assuming that maybe if you grew up in an abusive environment, that they didn't take the time to teach you, how to have an allowance and brush your teeth and take care of yourself and, make sure you had plenty of water and vegetables and rest and healthy foods, and you were in a healthy environment, you had healthy friends, and that you had help with your homework. And, for us to use the word allowed, when we say I allowed so much, the only thing that's been helping me, Billy, is the inner child work I'm doing. It's that sitting with those younger parts that were abandoned or made to feel like they were in charge of everything when they had no business being in charge of everything because they were so young. I don't know if you have a therapist, Billy, who is willing to walk through some inner child work with you, but sometimes writing a letter to that younger version of ourselves, or even writing a letter with our non-dominant hand from that younger version of ourselves, some things that we struggled through. That can be very, very therapeutic. I wouldn't do it on your own, though. I would make sure that you're properly cared for by someone that is, you know, a professional, so that when you're triggered, they can help you stay within your window of tolerance. I don't want you to be unnecessarily triggered or feeling horrible for long periods of time. You deserve excellent care, Billy. So I hope that's helpful. Last question. Katie Lee says, I struggle to access my anger. Did your abuse begin when you were really, really, really young, Katie? Because a lot of people, when they have trouble accessing their anger, their abuse began at a very, very, very early age, and they just feel like they need to be perfect, and perfect people don't get angry. I'm going to go on. Katie says, I struggle to access anger, but I burst into tears if I am told off or corrected when I've done something wrong. Example, at work, it's like I feel like I'm 4 years old and I have instant tears. This was so me, Katie. Oh my goodness. This was me in my 20s and even sometimes in my 30s. And it's because it comes from a place of perfectionism, and we were expected to be perfect. And we had somehow made a deal with ourselves when we were younger, Katie, that if we did this, 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 and this perfect, then maybe we wouldn't be abused. Maybe if I do this, 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 and this perfect, then maybe I won't be abused. Maybe if I do this, 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 and this perfect, then I will get my mom's attention. Maybe if I do this, 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 and this perfectly, then my so-and-so will not abuse me. Or if I do this, 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 and this perfect, then maybe blank will happen. We made deals with ourselves. We made pacts with ourselves. We made oaths with ourselves, and they were tied to our performance. They were tied to our perfection. And so what that does is that causes us to, instead of feeling angry, which is what we really should feel about the way we were treated, it shows up in that we cry and then we shame ourselves for not being perfect, because we're totally convinced still that if we're perfect, then we wouldn't be being corrected, right? So, Katie, the best thing that I did for myself when I was struggling with this is journaling. Journaling helped me more than I even know how to explain to you. And the inner child work that followed was some of the most healing work that I've ever done in my entire life. So I hope that's helpful. And we're 9 minutes over, you guys. I'm sorry that I didn't get to Ashton, Carol, Holistic Recovery, 2020 more hours to go. I'm sorry I didn't get to those. There is a possibility that we could do a part 2 of anger next week if I receive enough emails from you guys that part 2 of anger is something that you would like me to cover. info@cptsdfoundation.org is the email address you can send it to. If you want to get plugged into a safe group, you can email lisa@cptsdfoundation.org. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for participating. Thanks for sending excellent questions. Without your questions, we have no YouTube channel and no community. And there are over 4,000 of you in over 180 countries that all watch the replays or the live videos. And that is just astonishing to me and humbling. And you guys are just amazing. So thank you for being amazing. Thank you for being here. Come back next week, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, right here. And email me if you want me to do part 2 of anger in CPTSD recovery. Otherwise, we'll move on to another emotion that shows up in our trauma recovery, and how that emotion can trigger us. Perhaps if I don't get enough emails that people want to do another week of anger, we can move on to happiness and how happiness shows up in our trauma recovery, and how when we're feeling happy, it triggers us and causes a spiral backwards, down, back into our trauma and back into fear. And then we shame ourselves because we're like, why can't I just feel happy? That's so common. And every one of my clients has struggled with that. So I hope that you have a great week, and I look forward to seeing you back here, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, next Monday, while we talk about processing feelings during CPTSD recovery. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel and like this video, give it a thumbs up, and share it with someone if you think it might be helpful for someone, or invite them to come next week. Thanks so much, everybody. Bye-bye.